As Lupino vanished into the wilds of the Nexus, Renato vaguely remembered Lupino had a baby daughter, didn't he? And he told her mother he was going out to get some Easter eggs, and he'd never come back. But Renato was relieved not to carry the core anymore. He was already feeling better. And who knows, maybe this time Lupino would get it right. And if Renato could take the outpost, he'd have access to all the Empire's communications in the sector. Right?
Once, he found a Superman issue #1 in mint condition in a jar he'd broken. He planned to keep breaking things until he had the whole series.
Who needed bridges anyway? Renato caught his breath. His joints still hurt, but he couldn't feel the poison in his system anymore. He'd let the armature slip out of his hands to save his friend Lupino. Of course he had to let Lupino take the core. The rebellion needed every man doing his duty. And the rabbit would be no good taking on an Imperial outpost, right? A crafting bench. Renato wondered what he could make with it. Renato took the outpost with a song in his heart. Soon, he was stuffing his sack with key messages from and to the fleet. One message caught his attention. A high priority order has been given by the Emperor himself to locate something called the Iblis Stone. It was somewhere on a desert island. Renato had a bad feeling about this. Iblis was the name of one of the lost gods. If the Emperor was diverting ravens to search for it, maybe he should try to find it first. Then the Farspeaker Toad chortled a new message. The observatory had been sacked by ravens. Lapino and all the scientists had been taken to the mountains. Why? Why had he trusted Lapino again? And now the Empire had the core. Renato hailed the rebel base to warn them. But their Farspeaker didn't croak back. Was the base under attack too? Going on at the base, but he knew what the ravens would do to Lapino if Renato didn't rescue. Renato felt a twinge of doubt. Should he have gone to the base? No. Logically, wherever they'd taken Lapino was probably where they took the core, right? Oh, why couldn't Lapino have just, for once, not got himself captured? Was that too much to ask? He shouldn't be too hard on the rabbit. No, he meant well, and he was insanely brave. You had to admire that.
What else could you hook?
Don't be shy. Renato had been the terror of the sandcastles when he was 2. This is quite the view, he thought. Where were they holding Lapino anyway? There was no sign of him or the ravens who'd captured him. Just rocks and snow and the usual scouts. No sign of the Corps either. Was this a wild rabbit chase? Oh, trust Lapino to screw up even getting captured. But what was this rebellion for anyway? Well, Lapino was a useless goof. But he was a friend. If friends didn't matter anymore, what was the point of winning this war? A lever? That was new. Most people still use doorknobs.
The rebellion would soon be engaging the Imperial fleet in a desperate battle. All Reynardo had done was save a friend. It didn't feel as good as he'd hoped.
At the end of the mountain path, Reynardo came to a clearing. There was a campfire, raven feathers, and... oh, Lapino's lucky deck of cards. Well, that wasn't good. Reynardo hoped Lapino had not tried to cheat his captors at cards. Ravens were much better than weasels at counting, and they had a very poor sense of humor.
Then, he saw what he had hoped never to see. Fresh scraps of rabbit fur. Ragged and bloody, ravens would eat anything.
By Crabthar's hammer! Reynardo screamed at the sky. I will avenge you!
The rebels had assembled their fleet. Ahead, the clouds were dark with Imperial ships. If he could reach the Emperor before the rest of the rebels did, maybe he could settle this without too much bloodshed. He set sail, and the Farfarer shot forward.
Poor Lapino had never been a great warrior. The mad rabbit was good for a lark and a laugh. And a pint. The thought of ravens eating him made Reynardo furious. The way they were eating up the land. The way the Emperor was eating up the people with his new, bloodthirsty ways. He would make them all pay. That could come in handy in a pinch. There was an engraving. Maximum capacity, 130 people. It was good to practice your moves, thought Bernardo. Teach you limber. He had given up every objective to save his friend. He'd given up the armature, the core, the gem, and even Zenobia. He loved Lupino, he realized. And now the rabbit was gone. A hero looks out for his friends, even when they're gone. He would send Lupino an honor guard of ravens to serve him in the halls of the Valiant. He would avenge him. Once you try it, you're hooked. Renato knew more than he ever had. But about what? Finally, he reached the Emperor's ship. And there was Lapino, surrounded by ravens. He was alive. They'd eaten some other rabbit. "I'll save you!" he shouted with joy and flung himself at the ravens. "Oh, you shouldn't have," said Lapino when the last raven was down. Renato threw his arms around his best friend. "I had to come. I love you, man." "You really, really shouldn't have," said Lapino. And Renato felt a rather sharp pain in his back. As he collapsed, Lapino took the dagger out of Renato's back and wiped it off on Renato's sleeve. "Why, you always have to be the hero. Brave Renato, epic Renato, super sexy Renato, and I'm sick of it. But I loved you." "And you thought I was the idiot," said Lapino as Renato died. Okay, that was weird. He could have sworn he just died. Instead, he was on the Farfarer, sailing away from Ubar. And it was still burning. He'd fled burning Ubar years ago, hadn't he? And now he was back there. Had all those years fighting the Empire been nothing but a vision into the future? A useful vision if it was true. He'd learned something. Lapino was a traitor. Renato had suspected there was something wrong with the mad rabbit. But now he knew there was malice behind his goofiness. He'd made bad choices. But now, when the real battle came, he wouldn't make those choices. He wouldn't make the same mistake twice. The book's pages began to flip backwards, towards the beginning. And he realized that his adventure was just beginning. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game-changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced, or so a scholar in the mountains had told him. Surely the weapon that banished the lost gods could defeat the Emperor. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Renato. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Every child knew about the Sky Ripper. As he set foot on the island, Renato couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lapino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Renato felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Renato never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it? This burning sword from the south was terrific for barbecuing sausages
and ravens. Hey, I'm a firefox, thought Renato. When I build my castle, thought Renato, all my gates are going to open with buttons, and all the levers will drop rocks at your head.
The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the Lost Gods, thousands of thousands had died. But Renato had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one.
He was more and more extraordinary. Hero wall, hero sword, ice wall, ice cube. My God, it's full of stars. guess now I find out what's next, he thought.
"Say goodnight, Gracie," said Renato, wondering who Gracie was.
Rather well, actually.
How are you guys fixed for life insurance? Oh, sweet! A gem.
All he needed now was a workbench, and he could slot it into his gauntlet. That had been his mistake before, trusting his old friend Lapino, who'd been through so many battles with him and shared so many heartaches, who he'd rescued so many times. What was up with that guy anyway?
There it was. Sky Ripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway.
The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. It was a no-brainer. He'd sacrificed his old friend Lapino to get the armature. And the armature was useless by itself, only a series of coils and wheels. War demanded sacrifices, and he would make more before the end. He would have to choose the greatest good, no matter how much it cost him. Zenobia. Well, he would see her sooner or later, across a battlefield or a sword's point before all this was over. He was sure of that. The power was in the core. Obviously, he had to get the core. He looked up at the old trees around him. They were so big and so old. They'd been there before he was born, and they'd be there after he'd passed into legend. Was he confronting his own unimportance? What had got into him? He was no philosopher. Anyway, who cares? He was plenty important. He was a hero, and soon he'd prove it. The waterfall was spectacular. You had to enjoy these things as they came. We passed this way but once. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. He wished there were more pylons he could use the hook on. They really needed to construct additional pylons. There were fewer and fewer trees. There were only these huge crystalline growths.
Had those been here before? He no longer heard birds except for the feverish cawing of the ravens when they attacked. He couldn't smell the small animals of the forest, the mice and rabbits. Where had they gone? And he was getting hungry, too. This was an unhealthy place to be. Think of all the artisans he was creating employment for. Truly, he was a job creator. He wasn't that good. Yet. The 20-sided core made him feel physically sick. Once he had sneaked into a temple of the dark art, and he hadn't liked what he smelt and saw there. This felt like that. As quick as he could, he wrangled the icosahedron into the armature. The wheels began to spin, then glow. The sick feeling quickly spun away. Now he only felt sad. He had lost good friends for this war apparatus. Maybe Lapino wasn't such a good friend. He carried his prize back to the Farfarer. Now he had to make his next move. There was a key Imperial outpost on the Nexus. If this really was some sort of super weapon, he could use it to wreak havoc on the enemy. And if it wasn't, well, better to know that before the final battle. But maybe he should show it to some scientists first. There was an observatory on the Nexus. Maybe he should go there before he fired it. Reynardo had never been much of a student. At Swordfu School, he'd never read the books, just looked at the pictures. And Zenobia. But weapons he understood. His gut told him that the Skyripper would work great. He would use it to take out the Imperial outpost. And what's the worst that could happen? The thing wouldn't work, and then he'd take it to the scientists. Right? Exactly. As he set out down the path, Reynardo wondered why the parts of the Skyripper had only surfaced now, thousands of years after the Transcendent Emperor had discarded it. This Emperor, Isengrim III, had performed terrible, bloodthirsty rituals to invoke the lost gods. Perhaps that was bringing up lost artifacts. How perfect, then, that the Skyripper would reappear to be his destruction. What was really fun was hooking yourself onto a moving ship.
mother wasn't watching. He was tired of slaughtering ravens. Maybe it was time to test out the new weapon. He turned a knob on the Sky Ripper. It made strange mechanical noises. The wheels spun faster. It began to hum.
The Sky Ripper was following his every step. At least it acknowledged him as the master. But there was no trigger. How was he supposed to fire it? "Fire," he said. Nothing happened. Well, maybe it just needed to warm up. After all, it hadn't been fired in thousands of years.
Bernardo felt a little better. The Sky Ripper was making a whining noise now, and its wheels were spinning so fast he could no longer see them. Bernardo had a thought.
"Please?" he asked.
The Sky Ripper began to glow. Boom! The outpost burst into flame. Ravens flapped out screaming, wings on fire. The base was his. The far speaker toad came hopping out. "Bernardo!" It croaked, sounding like a toad version of Zenobia. "Don't use the Sky Ripper. It will destroy the world." "Yeah, sure it will," cracked Bernardo. "Pull the other one." "If you don't trust me, go see Calaveras." That sounded sensible. Why did she always have to sound sensible all the time? Oh, it was infuriating.
Of course she would say that. He was supposed to hurry and bring the Sky Ripper to the council so the rebels could actually win the war. But what if she was right?
Damn it. Just this once, he... Imperials were flapping and cawing all around the ruins. They must be panicking with rumors flying of the superweapon. Maybe they hoped to find and destroy the base before he could put the Sky Ripper into action. The Sky Ripper was whining and heating up. It would be time to use that energy soon.
Sometimes, at home, he'd wave his sword around for hours.
Sometimes, Renata really hated inanimate objects. Not quite enough, thought Renato.
Da Red. Não, esse jogo é da Plus, mas não é de agora. É mais antigo.
He'd once been a pirate captain. He used hooks to get around his ship. What was his name again? What was Zenobia talking about? This was a fantastic weapon. Ravens burst into flames with just a touch of its killer beam. Yeah, he was tempted to leave it on all the time, but he didn't want to accidentally slice off some council toad's head or tongue. Yeah, she'd been trying to distract him. Well, this time, no one was going to distract him.
Rosebud, he said to no one in particular. He died.
Verdade. É um jogo que eu tô pensando em comprar esse jogo. Quase que eu vou. Ele tava R$20 esse tempo atrás. Não sei se esse é o preço original dele.
Windy up here.
Ah, eu não sei se sai de graça. Acho difícil voltar.
These things really slice like ham. Bye-bye, life, he thought. Hello, emptiness. The long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good.
Porcaria, mano. Beleza, Diego.
Faster, stronger, bolder.
Tem muita pouca vida.
As he headed towards the council chamber, Bernardo felt everyone watching him.
"You've saved the rebellion," said the council speaker. "Frankly, we were afraid." I deceived that idiot Lapino.
Not bloody likely, Bernardo told them, feeling he was maybe being a bit harsh on the poor mad rabbit.
"If you never make sacrifices," he said, "you're probably not doing the right thing." The speaker nodded. "Are you ready to lead the charge?" "Let's roll," he said, with grim satisfaction. Bernardo set sail for the fleet. The Sky Ripper had lost its wine. It was humming now, as if it had taken some time to seat properly. He had always been irresponsible. This time, he'd done the right thing, made the hard decisions. He was a real hero. He hadn't let himself be distracted by old friends or old lovers turned enemies. Finally, he could be proud of himself.
He was ready. So was Skyripper. The Skyripper had a will of its own. It picked out its own targets and set them on fire.
Now, this was going to be a short battle. He would set the ships on fire if he didn't need them to get to the Emperor. And he wondered if he'd see Zenobia, or if she'd flee. Wouldn't she be proud of him? At least, a bit of respect. He'd become an all-conquering hero.
Every day he was getting better and better.
When Renato went to the china shop, for some reason the owner was always nervous.
Checked to make sure his sword was still working. Yep.
There was a parchment on a signpost. It was from her.
Every time you fire, you risk the destruction of the universe. That's insane. We surrender. A trick? Maybe she really believed it. He could hear horns blaring the retreat. Maybe it was true. Maybe they had one.
That was always a rush. Renato wondered if it wasn't cheaper to build bridges and stairs. And there was Zenobia, wearing the white robes of surrender. She came and kneeled before him.
Why didn't you listen to me? I was trying to save you too.
You're the enemy, he said.
I was never your enemy, Renato.
Then she spoke a terrible word and made a gesture with her hand. She stopped moving, covered in frost, and he wondered why she'd frozen herself. Then the Sky Ripper froze, and then, for a moment, he felt very cold and discovered that he couldn't move. The next thing he knew, the sun was a giant, monstrously red. It took up half the sky, and he was in a parched red desert. And then he was on fire. Renato stared at the book. He was still alive. Again. And still only flying away from burning Ubar. Had he lived that adventure? Or only dreamt it? Had he really died? It felt so real, not like a dream at all. And he'd lost again. Oh, he hated that. But he had made different choices. And he'd lost in a different way. It was the book, wasn't it? Oracles showed you your destiny. But this was showing him different ways he could die miserably. Thanks a bunch, book, he thought. But these were destinies that he did not have to fulfill. But he'd learned another true thing. Zenobia still had feelings for him. But that meant there must be a destiny where he survived and won, right? Otherwise, what was the point? And with that, the book's pages fluttered back once more to the beginning, and the clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced, or so a scholar in the mountains had told him. Surely the weapon that banished the lost gods could defeat the Emperor. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Renato. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? The island was windswept desert. Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away. Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in a buried temple, another ancient item that was only resurfacing now, drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals? If he ever had a castle, he was going to hide his stuff better. The air here tasted bitter. The steps were too tall for a person. The entire place felt restless. like it had been vexed to nightmare under the dust, waiting for its hour to come around at last.
Shall we dance? Toward the lead raven?
They were still searching for a way in. Good. And he hadn't come too late.
He was practically sure he'd find something useful in one of these things.
Once, he didn't have anything clever to say. So he died. The goat. Take the goat across first, Bernardo thought. It was too late. This was what it was like to die. Not nearly as much fun as they said. Should have done a barrel roll, he thought, as he died. some reason, Bernardo remembered a fairy tale his mother had told him. That a land where only the apes talked, and animals went around without clothes.
Within your aerobics trace. Am I right?
Bernardo wondered idly if people who had built these poles had really, really long tentacles. What's there? accused could not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders. What did you do if one of these platforms stalled?
It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. Who said that? It was the stone. Eager, thirsty. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once, and Renato wasn't sure he really wanted to be Emperor. Why not capture the core of Skyripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. "The core," said the stone anxiously. Listening to a talking rock?
Ah, but the rock had a point. If the stone could truly turn him into a powerful warrior, he could defeat the Emperor with the very weapon the wicked old... As he placed the impossibly black crystal in his gauntlet, Renato had a sudden vision. Charred fields covered in dead ravens below a black sun.
Was it the time of the lost gods before the transcendent Emperor? Was it the future? It whispered. Take the power. He could feel the stone's hunger for souls, its thirst for blood. All right, I get it.
This was going to be interesting.
I think this is yours, said Renato, but he couldn't hear his enemy's answer.
These things could really use a hand. What was the point of this gate? Did they think no one would notice the lever? Zenobia was waiting for Renato. She was alone, confident as always. Fire danced at the tips of her claws.
Are you here to surrender? She seemed as cocksure as he felt. But she didn't know he had the stone. And I've missed you too, love.
He chuckled. She spotted the stone and bolted without another word. Hey! Hey, a workbench! He could try out his new bling. One small step for a fox, he thought. Bring out your arms. The ravens on Zenobia's island were no match for Renato. They screamed as the stones sucked out their souls. And with each death, he felt stronger. Take the power, the stone told him. Finally, Renato caught up to her. He had never seen her scared before. At school, she'd been the determined, brave one. Now her eyes were wide, frightened. He didn't like seeing her this way. Kill her, whispered the stone. You cannot win your rebellion without it. Please. No, said Zenobia. Not that way. Oh, they had been so close once. Could he really feed her soul to his demonic gem? But if he spared her, he would not get the full power of the stone. Oh, how could he be the hero he wanted to be? Renato hesitated. Zenobia was his greatest enemy. She was the Emperor's daughter and his greatest general. And a single person Renato Renato felt a little sick.
Ever since Zenobia had taken the stone from him, he'd felt an ache that wouldn't go away. He missed it. He wanted it back. He needed it back. Why hadn't he killed her when he had the chance? She was the enemy. He hadn't even seen her in 14 years. Why had he hesitated? You're a sucker for an empowered woman. Renato kicked himself. Don't make that mistake again.
Oh, they really ought to put a railing on this thing, he thought.
So much. It was time to turn it into something he could use. Zenobia thought the stone was evil. Was it? He longed to have it back. He'd felt so good killing ravens with it. And yet, he'd felt unclean ever since he'd touched it. She confused him. She'd made him want to be a better fox. And then she'd abandoned him, never telling him she was the Emperor's daughter, never contacting him since. But who was she to tell him the stone was evil? Have you ever felt you were just going round in circles? Renato felt like that.
And while he was trying to recover the stone Zenobia had taken from him, the Imperial fleet was tightening its grip. He might fail to save the rebellion, and it would all be her fault. Renato felt a burst of outrage. Not only had she stolen his gem, she'd also stolen his scientists. Sure, they were neutral, but they had helped him discover what the Emperor was up to. They were supposed to be helping me. So unfair. He was sort of yanking his own chain, wasn't he?
The scientist toads were pointing arcane instruments at the stone and looking at it through prisms and reflections.
Mine, said Reynardo as he took back the stone.
Well, we need it for science, croaked the toads. So he killed them. He felt better immediately. Smarter, too. I thought you'd never come for me, whispered the stone.
Then, a far speaker toad croaked, and something like Zenobia's voice.
Reynardo, leave the stone with the toads. It will swallow your soul. You'll kill everyone you love.
But Reynardo had an army to lead, an empire to bring down.
I know you can fight this thing.
Zenobia continued in the fast. As the Farfarer landed at the foot of the mountain,
There had to be something useful in these things, didn't there?
Reynardo told his friend how he had slaughtered the toads and how he had nearly slain Zenobia. A terrible burden, this Iblis stone.
This would be the perfect place for a tic-tac-toe board. I don't have to clean up around here, he thought. should really look for another line of work, he thought. And then he died. Sweet. You could use this material to craft a spork. Or a sword. Renato thought it would make a difference, snatching the Iblastone before the Emperor could get it. But it would destroy him. Zenobia and Lupino, they were both trying to save him. Peace. That was what he needed. So much for peace and quiet. There was Lupino. Again.
You're stronger than some dumb rock, Lupino said. Let's just bury it, and no one will ever find it again.
Bernardo could feel the spirit energy of all those dead ravens inside him, pecking away. The rabbit was right. Even if the rabbit was a traitor, he was still right. He tore the Iblastone from his gauntlet and threw it into the hole Lupino had dug. The stone was silent. Probably sulking.
Now whoop those Imperials, said Lupino.
Are you coming?
Ah, no, I can't come with you. It's my old injury, you know. Recently, it's been acting up terrible. I'd be no use to you at all.
So Renato boarded the Farfarer alone. Renato felt lonely on board the Farfarer. How could his old friend Lupino, miraculously escaped from the Empire, leave him to face the final battle alone? Well, he'd abandoned Lupino before, hadn't he? It was only fair. And, of course, he felt lonely. He'd given up the Iblastone and all the souls he fed it. Of course he felt alone. But he had done the right thing. It had been hard to do, but there was no better feeling than that. Zenobia would be so proud of him. The battle, alas, was not going well. He no longer had the stone, and he'd never gotten the core. Lupino wasn't with him, and he was up against Zenobia, out there somewhere, maneuvering the Emperor's forces. The rebels had been outnumbered from the start, and he still had that aching longing for the stone. But that is what it means to be a hero. He would fight his way to Zenobia. He would show her what he was capable of. Just him, with no diabolic accoutrements. He would win, no matter the odds. The mysterious sword from the east made you so fast you could catch a fly with your chopsticks. If that's what you really wanted. This stone was incredibly valuable. Reynaldo could sense it. Also, it still had its price tag. Yes, that was it. Pirouette, slash, parry, dodge. Reynaldo had never done such good work in a fight. He wished the poets were along to sing of his exploits for his old age. Maybe he wouldn't have to kill Zenobia. Maybe he could defeat her and take her prisoner. Then he could turn the tide against the Emperor. If she wasn't crowned princess, once this was all over, she'd have more time for him, right? But there were still so many games to play, Reynaldo thought as he died. Take a leap of faith, said the inscription. By some miracle, Reynaldo fought his way to the Emperor's ship. He was exhausted, bleeding, but he'd found the strength to reject the stone. Zenobia came out of the ship. "Reynaldo!" she shouted, and then she fell down and died. Lapino was behind her, wielding a sword that seemed to suck all the light out of the sun.
You idiot! You threw the stone away!
cried Lapino.
You said it was evil.
It hates sanctimonious pricks like you, laughed Lapino. And we're having a grand old time. Renato turned and ran. But no matter where he ran, Lapino jumped in front of him until Renato was cornered. That boy could hop. You wouldn't do this to an old friend, would you? Cried Renato.
You mean this? Said Lapino,
as he slid the sword into Renato's guts.
Damn it! Again!
And just like that, he was alive again, and back on the Farfarer, still fleeing burning Ubar. The book was still open before him. So, the book was a portal. It took you to the future when your destinies would branch. He had failed and died 3 times, and he hadn't learned anything new this time. He'd done the same thing twice, yet expected a different outcome. But he was starting to feel like he was getting the hang of this. There was a way through to victory. He could feel it. He just had to keep running the path of destinies. With that, the book fluttered back to the beginning, and he fell into it. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game-changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Or so a scholar in the mountains had told him. Surely the weapon that banished the lost gods could defeat the Emperor. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert, as tempting as it was to explore ancient mysteries. There was a war going on. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Ah, Lapino. Lapino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen the winged horse. He'd only sold it. But, wait. Where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled the Ravens? Smashing things was fun.